Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another tabletop RPG review. So, for a while now, I've been covering the releases of various indie RPGs in my RPG News Roundup, and in other news posts. And for months, yes, months, every time one of them comes up that mentions that it's based on the Black Hack, I keep mentioning I should review that. I've had it, I've played it, it's not very complex. So now that I'm making it a point to do more of these reviews in general, I figured where better to start than to slay the procrastination beast and finally take a look at the Black Hack. It's an extremely streamlined, Rules Lite OSR RPG based on the original edition but flipped entirely around and designed for swift creation and ease of play. So we'll go through the usual technical specifications first, the overview of the contents, and then what I think of the product overall. The Black Hack was added to RPG Now in March 2016, I believe. It's written by David Black and published by Gold Piece Publications. It's available as a PDF with a current price of just $2, and as a printed edition currently available on the Square Hex website, which I will probably link below. I'm going to try the link below. It's a weird URL, so I'd probably better link it below. Anyway, this review will cover the PDF version, because that's the one I have. Minus the cover and legal, there's less than 20 pages to cover of all the system content. And the content there is presented in a clean, relatively large font that would not be out of place in a pocket-style rulebook. That having been said, there's almost no space wasted. There's no interior art, although pages do have a background abstract texture, and the few tables and charts that are there are arranged with an eye towards quick reference. The core book gives you all of the basics that you need to run a game similar to what you'd expect of an early edition fantasy RPG. The first half of the rulebook is a collection of basic rules to use while running and playing the game. These rules are incredibly compact and streamlined, with the vast majority of tests, attacks, saves, etc. simply handled by rolling below an ability score on a d20. In this way, the monsters and such should never actually have to roll, leaving all the tests as to whether they hit or not up to the players. Ability scores are the standard 6 from the D&D tradition, each generated with a roll of 3d6 in order. But in order to help balance the characters out, if a high score is rolled, the next one is rolled using a reduced die layout. At the end, 2 ability scores can be switched, allowing for a small degree of character customization in terms of selecting classes. The core rulebook only includes 4 basic classes of yore: Warrior, Cleric, Conjurer, and Thief. Starting gold is rolled in a similar way to many OSR games, with just 3d6 times 10. Armor functions as mitigation rather than avoidance, with each armor type absorbing a certain amount of damage between each rest. Basic equipment then follows, which introduces the concept of the usage die. They're used to track whether you run out of a particular type of expendable gear rather than using exact numbers. This is a concept I believe that I've seen taken from other abstract-style OSR games, and I actually kind of like it, although it does make planning hard if you're in the dungeon. Saves are more akin to what you'd see in 5th edition, with each boiling down to an ability score test, although such tests follow the roll your score or under methods of this game rather than the 5th edition versus a DC type scaling. Time is similar to modern RPGs, where combat rounds are measured in an undefined number of seconds, and exploration turns in segments of a minute each. Movement and distance is abstracted out into general ranges that are more useful for theater of the mind style narrative encounter descriptions, although there is a rough conversion chart offered for those who do have battle maps. Combat is super straightforward. Initiative is just a dexterity test. Monsters are defined pretty much solely by their hit dice and special actions. A monster's hit dice determine their armor and their damage, since all rolls are on the player side of the game. They don't really need to make any additional stats for these monsters at all. When a character attacks a monster, they make an appropriate ability check versus dexterity or strength, depending on whether it's a ranged or a melee attack. And when the character is attacked in turn by a monster, they make the same sort of ability check to see if they've managed to counter the attack or get out of the way. This is modified if a particular monster is more powerful than the character's level, but that's about it. Damage, as stated for monsters, is based on their hit dice according to a table, while the damage a character does is based on their class, modified only by whether the weapon they're holding happens to be two-handed or not. If it's two-handed, it might grant additional damage. Critical hits are handled a little differently than in most D20 games, with a 1 being good on attacks and a 20 being bad on defense. Characters don't immediately die when they are reduced to 0 hit points, but rather are taken out of action. Only at the end of combat do they get to roll on a table to see what happens to them. So a player who gets their character knocked out gets to sit on the sidelines and sit on pins and needles throughout the rest of the combat to see if they actually died or not. Unless, of course, they receive healing before the end of combat, in which case they're automatically saved. The Black Hack does use the 5th edition concept of advantage and disadvantage, which fits in well with its player-centric role system. It uses a kind of simplified version of the resting system as well, so you've got a short rests of about an hour, allowing a recuperation of armor points, and 1 rest each day, 1 short rest each day, allowing a character to regain a small amount of hit points, which is really more akin to what you'd see in earlier editions rather than the new version. Experience points are completely done away with each dungeon section, major quests, whatever a character survives being 1 level. That allows for the addition of hit points, but also the chance to raise 1 stat of the player's choice. It's not guaranteed, however, they do have to roll for it. Encumbrance is simplified to the point where it's actually useful, with the number of items being carried more important than the actual weight behind those items. I presume this is more about being in line with the spirit of the rules than the letter of the rules in order to prevent characters from hoisting around a dozen tables or siege weapons and not having a DM penalize them for having a bunch of matches in their backpack. There are the typical rules for random encounters and creature reactions, as well as for clerics banishing undead, although all of them are very much streamlined. Magic weapons function similarly to what you might expect in other D&D-derived games, but magic armor is literally twice as useful as normal armor, which really, really, really improves the value of it. So with that first half of the PDF out of the way, you've got all of the basic rules that you really do need to run a dungeon crawl or even an outdoors adventure of similar scope for the old school system. What follows that first half are all of the specific details that you'd need to run an OSR fantasy game, and yet it's perhaps the most optional portion of this book, and we'll get into that later on. The next section, immediately after the basic rules, is the class section, which each of the 4 basic classes are described in a single page, listing starting hit points, weapons and armor, attack damage, special features that define their abilities, and rules for leveling up. This is followed by spellcasting rules, which generally follow the classic spell slot system, but they have a memorization requirement more akin to 5th edition, wherein you get a certain amount of spells per day across all of your potential levels. There is also a potential to retain a spell slot after it's being cast, so if you cast Magic Missile, then you roll a test, and then if you pass it, then you keep the spell slot without actually, expending it. The spell lists themselves take a page for each of the 2 spellcasting classes, with the basic spells divided by level and given just a single line of detail each. It's even more simple than the original white box. The next couple pages are just a number of monster types described, with each monster listed by name and hit dice, and any actions and specials regarding them. So you can actually list the entire monster on just 2 lines, or 1 line if it's a simple monster. This allows for a very large number of monsters to be listed in a very small space. In fact, the format is even simpler than the original white box format. The PDF concludes with a character record sheet and example of play, followed by the legal information. So all in all, the Black Hack PDF is a fairly typical OSR layout style PDF, providing the basics that you need to run an old school dungeon crawling experience all in one go. At first glance, the rules also seem relatively derivative, but on closer inspection, they take some of the most innovative mechanics of several modern editions and OSR systems together and just blend them into something that feels actually pretty unique. The simplified rule set also allows for a great deal of expansion and adaptation. Several unofficial class expansions have been produced, and indeed the very inspiration for me wanting to review this core system was the sheer proliferation of other genre systems that use this one as their base. Everything from horror to weird western to sci-fi to post-apocalyptic have all been done with this system, simply adding a few additional rules and then changing up the classes and monster types of the kernel of the Black Hack. After examining and then playing the system for a little bit, I have to say that it is an extremely tight, fast, easily learned core, which may not be everything to everyone, but is extremely good at what it does. And that is to present some bare-bones mechanics that allow you to get into the game swiftly, play the session through with a focus on character actions and role-playing over number crunching, and minimize record keeping. What it does not do is provide an exacting, detailed system that allows for specific customization of character builds or directly support such extended metagames as item crafting, strongholds, mass combat, etc., etc. So do I recommend this? I'm going to give this one a qualified yes. If you're looking for a simple, quick in, quick out way to run a really quick RPG scenario on the fly, but you want to provide a little more control to the DM than something like Dungeon World might provide, it's a little bit cleaner and more consistent than some other Rules Lite OSR games that I've seen. And the fact that it has already been adapted to a large number of genres means that for a couple of bucks, someone can have a game up and running in a matter of moments in a number of different scenarios. If, however, you love complex character builds, you demand a more nuanced or rules-focused system, or expect to run an RPG scenario that requires large, complex battles, or if you just want to expand into things like mass combat and kingdom building, you're probably not going to like this one very much. Now, I'd love to take a look at all the various variations of the Black Hack system and its expansions, but there's a ton out there. And I hope that you've probably got enough information from just what I've stated about the core rules to determine whether you want to look into it or not for a particular genre. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'll put links to where you can get this in the description below as always. For now, this has been the RPG Crawler. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content. If you'd like to get early access to videos like this, help support the channel, and generally shape upcoming content, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/rpgcrawler or through the links at the end of the video and in the description below. Until next time, take care and goodbye.